Another way to find points of interest as an alternative to trace is to use analyze graph. Trace sometimes doesn't work if the graph is really steep and you're trying to find an x-intercept in an interval. It could jump over that. With analyze graph, you have a little more control. It's probably the setup I use more often. So we've got our cubic function, same as before, 0.1x cubed plus 0.1x squared minus 2.6x plus 2.4. That's graphed. And we're going to try to use analyze graph to find the rightmost x-intercept or 0. So we're going to try to find this point right here that I'm hovering over. So to do that, we're going to do menu. And then instead of trace, we're going to do analyze graph. And then if we see our menu options here, we want to find a 0. A 0 is where the y value is 0. So that's an x-intercept. So I'm going to click that. And you see in the tool up in the top left that icon is we're trying to find a 0. And it tells us what to do. Click the function graph and then click the left and right search bounds or enter X values. So we don't need to click the function because we just have one function graph. So right now the calculator is saying lower bound. So we need to tell it a value, an X value on the left of the x-intercept that we want. So since we want this rightmost x-intercept, I have to make sure that I'm on the left side of that, but I don't want to include any of the other x-intercepts in the interval. So you can use the arrow keys on the keypad or the trackpad. So I'm going to click to the left of that x-intercept, and now it's saying upper bound. So now you can use the arrow keys and then come across to until you're on the right side of the x-intercept. So it's like if you were walking along the curve, now you would be on the right side of it. And then I can see the 0 there. If I hit enter, now I see the 0.4, 0 is on my graph. That is the x-intercept or the 0 that we wanted to find. We can use the same procedure to find relative maximum and minimum points. So a relative minimum point would be this point here, which is at a valley. The peak I can't see, so I need to change the window a bit in order to do that. One other thing I wanted to say, if we want to set the lower and upper bounds when we're doing analyze graph, we can just type in values. You don't have to drag something across. So let's try to find the local maximum and minimum of this graph. So I want to change the window a little bit. So I can either do menu and then do window settings, or I can just try to change this Y value. So let's see, we want this to go up a little bit. Let's say I want it to go to 12. So I can type 12 in here and then click enter. And now I can see the relative maxima and minimum points. And that's what I want to find. So we're going to do menu, analyze graph. And this time I want to find a maximum. And now it's asking me for the lower bound for that maximum. So I'm going to bring the cursor to the left of the maximum point. And now it's saying upper bound, and I'm going to go to the right of the maximum point. And now I have the maximum on the graph. A common error that you can make is if you don't set that window properly, we're not going to find the value. So for example, let me try that again. If I do menu, analyze graph, and I'll say maximum, if I set the lower bound, say here on the left side, but then I drag too far to the right, now the maximum value is actually the highest Y value in that interval. So the maximum value now is showing up as 5.91, 11.2, when really I was looking for -3.3, 8.48. So be really careful to set the intervals properly. Now I want to find the relative minimum. So I'm going to do menu, analyze graph, and now I want to find a minimum. And let me show you here how you can just type in values. So rather than clicking, I can say, okay, I can see that a good minimum value might be lower bound. A good lower bound might be 3. So I can click 3, enter. And then a good upper bound, oh, actually that was too large. I better undo that. So let's do Control Z and go back. I need to make it lower. So menu, analyze graph, minimum. So let's say I can pick 1 for my lower bound. So I'm going to type 1, enter. And then in upper bound, I can choose, let's say, 3, that should be high enough. So 3, what happened to my lower bound? I thought I clicked that already. I have 1, lower, why is it still waiting for lower bound? Let's do 1, enter. Try it again, minimum, lower bound. I'm gonna click 1, enter, and then upper bound. I need to choose, I can choose 3, enter. And now we found the minimum at 2.63, negative 1.93, which is the correct value. Let's see if we can find another x-intercept. Let's try to find this leftmost x-intercept. So I'll do menu, analyze graph, 0. And then I'll set the lower bound on the left side of that x-intercept and the upper bound on the right side of that x-intercept. And now we see we have an x-intercept at negative 6, 0. And we can find this last x-intercept. It looks like it's 1, 0, but maybe it's not. Menu, analyze graph, 0. Set a lower bound to the left of that x-intercept and an upper bound at the right. And I can move this label up to show that it's at 1, 0.